There was a version of you that trusted easily. You may have almost forgotten them. The version that reached out first, without rehearsing whether it was a good idea. That said the true thing in a conversation, not the safe thing. That assumed, without needing much evidence, that the people around you meant well and showed up accordingly. Fully. Warmly. In that open, specific way that most people reserve for moments when they feel completely certain they won't be hurt. You were not certain. You went anyway. And something happened to that version of you. Not a single event, usually. Not one dramatic betrayal that can be pointed to and named as the moment everything changed. Something slower. A pattern of smaller things accumulating. Warmth offered and not returned. Openness received and not protected. Trust extended carefully and genuinely to people who held it without particular care. You are colder now. That is what people notice, the ones who meet you after. Something restrained, something held back, something that does not arrive in a room the way it once did. And they read this as personality, as the way you are. They are reading the result, not the cause. This is the psychology of people who learned, through specific and repeated experience, that warmth gets punished. No one closes all at once. The closing is a process, and it begins not with a decision, but with a pattern. The pattern goes like this. You are open with someone. You offer something real, a feeling, a truth, a part of yourself that is not usually visible. And the response is not what the offering deserved. Not cruel necessarily, not intentionally dismissive, but insufficient, careless in that specific way that suggests the thing you offered was not registered as significant. You file this, not consciously, but somewhere in the architecture of how you move through the world, a small adjustment is made. The next time, you offer slightly less. You wait a moment longer before saying the true thing. You watch, briefly, before you trust. And if the pattern repeats, if openness, offered again and again, continues to return with less than it cost, the adjustments compound. The waiting becomes habitual, the watching becomes automatic, and the part of you that used to arrive in rooms fully, that used to reach without calculating the risk, begins to recede. Psychologists call this learned emotional guardedness, the gradual, experience-driven restructuring of how a person relates to intimacy. It is not a personality trait, it is a rational response to empirical data. You were warm, you gathered information about what happens to warmth in the environments you move through, and you updated your behavior accordingly. The closing was not a failure, it was an adaptation. But adaptations, even reasonable ones, have consequences. There is a specific cost to having been open in places that were not careful with openness. It is not just the individual hurt of each moment. It is what those moments collectively teach. They teach that the version of you which offers things freely is the version that gets taken advantage of. That the part of you which says the true thing is the part that gets used against you, or ignored, or treated as raw material for someone else's comfort without reciprocation. That being fully present in a relationship, bringing your whole self and not the edited version, is a risk that the other person did not sign up to match. And so that version of you gets associated through no single dramatic event, but through accumulated pattern with a specific outcome. Openness equals exposure. Warmth equals cost. Trust equals a transaction in which you reliably gave more than you received. The mind is efficient, it learns, and what it learned through all of this is that the open version of you was the vulnerable version, and vulnerability in the environments that shaped you was not something that was honored. It was something that was, in small and large ways, punished. So the mind did what minds do when they identify a behavior that consistently produces pain. It built a structure to prevent the behavior from occurring automatically, not to end warmth, but to gate it, to make it conditional, to require, before allowing the full version of yourself into a space, sufficient evidence that the space is safe enough to deserve it. The withdrawal makes complete sense. This needs to be said because it is almost never said. People who have become emotionally guarded are often treated as damaged, as people with issues to work through, walls to tear down, patterns to disrupt. The therapeutic language around this tends toward correction, identifying the guardedness as a problem and working to dissolve it. But the guardedness is not irrational. It is the product of rational inference from real experience. You were open. The openness was not sufficiently protected often enough that the pattern registered. You adjusted. This is not pathology. This is learning. The logic of withdrawal says, I offered warmth and it was not matched. I offered trust and it was not honored. I offered the full version of myself and it was received carelessly. Therefore, I will not offer these things without more evidence that they will be better received this time. This logic is sound. The only problem with it is that it is also, over time, self-reinforcing. Because the person who no longer offers warmth freely does not get the chance to discover which environments would have been safe. The protection that the closing provides also prevents the very experiences that might update the conclusion the closing was built to protect. You are safe from the pattern, but you are also, in a specific way, sealed inside it. There are things that close along with the openness, things you may not have accounted for when the adaptation was being built. What closes is not just the vulnerability, it is some of the warmth itself. The capacity to be delighted by someone, to be moved by what they say, to find, in an ordinary conversation, something that makes the day different than it would have been without them. Some of this is collateral damage. The gate that was built to keep out the wrong things also keeps out some of the right ones. What also closes, more quietly, is the relationship you have with your own wants. Because wanting things from other people, connection, to be known, to matter to someone, requires a degree of openness to disappointment. And a person who has been disappointed carefully, repeatedly, over years, begins to want less. Not because the wanting has gone, but because the wanting and the protection cannot easily coexist. And the protection won. This is the loss that is hardest to name. Not the specific people you did not let in, but the version of yourself that wanted to, that still wants to, somewhere behind the structure that was built to keep that wanting from costing too much.